Trump, according to Yahoo News, is downplaying economic woes as partisan spin, saying costs are way down. President Donald Trump said the U.S. economy is strong and insisted polls showing Americans are feeling economic pain are fake during an interview on Fox News that aired on Monday night. Trump said bad news about the economy amounted to a con job by the Democrats, adding Democrats feed major news network anchors with the message the economy is bad, and then every anchor does exactly what they say.
That is cope. That is 110% cope.
So there's two things here, because he is right about the way that news is presented regarding his administration and the way news is presented regarding basically anything Donald Trump touches. But at the same time, the idea that you can argue with people that are suffering, that are struggling, people that can't pay their bills, people that can't afford groceries. If I understand correctly, defaults are going up on credit card bills. There's record highs on defaults on car loans. People are starting to default on their rent and their mortgages and stuff like that. That kind of stuff you can't argue with. You can't say the economy's great and then look at the numbers and say, look, defaults are going up. People aren't able to pay their bills. These statistics do not lie. And so if Donald Trump is just going to say, hey, they're wrong, the American people are going to say, he doesn't give a crap about us. Yeah. Well, he doesn't know what's actually going on. He doesn't care about us.
Well, and you also can't say the economy is great after you've been talking about the need for 50-year mortgages and 15-year auto loans and everyone receiving a $2,000 stimulus check. Listen, the stimulus check thing, at the very least, maybe you can make the argument, well, we've been robbed by these other countries and the tariffs have delivered some of the money back to us, so I'll give it back to the people. Sure, maybe that's a separate conversation. But when you're talking about needing to make people debt slaves to banks for far longer periods of time than they've ever had to be to purchase things that people were able to purchase without having to give that kind of interest money to banks and burn that kind of capital, no, you can't turn around and say the economy is actually great.
Dude, speaking of him giving $2,000 checks, stimulus checks with tariff money, that's wealth distribution. That's him taking my money because prices have been jacked up due to tariffs and giving it to somebody else. That's communist socialist behavior. It's disgusting. It's shocking that he even thought of it. It's crazy.
That's been the standard for ever and ever, to be honest with you.
That's the unemployment tax.
That's exactly that's what they did when they started printing all the money that has created the income inequality that everyone's experiencing.
Well, Ian wants to end the Fed.
What?
Well, Ian wants to end the Fed. So
gradually.
He's going to agree with you.
And then suddenly.
But I mean, I am actually fond of the idea of ending the Federal Reserve as well. But when they start printing money and people that have things, they can take out, they have good credit, they have assets, they can take out loans at 0, 1, 2%, and then they put it into the stock market, and the stock market returns are 10, 15% per year. They're making, 12, 13% on this money that they borrowed, and all it's doing is sitting in the stock market because they bought stock with it, and they just make a bunch of money off of this loan because the government kept interest rates so cheap.
I want Noah to have a chance because he's been trying to get in here.
Yeah, well, so this takes me, we mentioned earlier the loss of Charlie Kirk. Charlie's last interview that he did with Tucker Carlson, he went on there with a single message. That message was the American youth are suffering.
Yep.
They are facing challenges that no other generation has faced, and this is a crisis, and we need to make this our top priority as a nation. And he didn't bring that because everything was going well. He brought that because he actually he talked about, and he was visibly frustrated on that in that conversation with Tucker, where he's like, I try to tell boomers this, and they will not listen.
Yeah.
And he broke down, the fact that this was just out the other day. We had a news story. The median age of first-time home buyers are now 40 years old. The median age of all home buyers is 60. Oh. And so we're talking, that is an insane statistic. The amount of debt that kids are getting into when they get out of college is it's absolutely astonishing. But then you go down the fact that, they're doing buy now, pay later on buying, Chipotle. It's absolutely, so he brought this. He felt that it was a critical issue. I think that we owe it to Charlie to keep talking about that because, that crisis is not going away until we solve it. And government caused basically every single problem that Charlie listed.
And this is one of those things that I've brought up a bunch of times, being that, like, first of all, they have a problem because they don't really have somebody to take over after Trump leaves office. There isn't a guaranteed candidate that really feels like he's waiting in the wings, and the youth are upset, and it feels like a race against. So right now, men and women are voting on party lines in a lot of ways. Men have been voting conservative because they feel like, or are voting Republican because they feel like the Democrats have absolutely nothing for them. But that only lasts so long. If the economy gets so bad, all it takes is one very charismatic Democrat to pull men who are desperate back to that side of the aisle, if all they do is gather enough power and enough influence within the party to be able to stave off the anti-men, anti-white part of the coalition there. And that could happen. Now, maybe we're talking about Mamdani in New York City. And if you don't think that it's possible that you get another charismatic Mamdani type that can run for can run for president, because he can't, it's very much possible. And that could happen. And they don't have an argument against that. I made a joke I'm like half joking when I said, like, they should just run Fetterman, because everybody, like, I saw something today saying, like, he's considering switching parties, and people are like, he should. And even if he doesn't, we need at least one sane Democrat. Like, literally all they need is like one sane Democrat. And there is a whole bunch of people in the middle who would be very willing to vote the other way because they're not getting what they want right now from the Republicans.
Well, here's the problem, and this is something the Democrats have been wrestling with to an extent since Trump's first election, but especially since his last election. They keep saying, how do we reach young men? How do we reach young men? How do we reach young men? And of course, what they're saying is, how do we continue to treat young men this way and still get them to vote for us? And now the right is actually starting to ask that exact same question. This occurred to me just the other day, that basically any time you hear the question, how do we reach young men? What you're really being asked is, how do I get young men to obey? Not, how do I give them a message that works? Not, how do I change circumstances to make the world friendlier to them so they can start families? And not, how do we genuinely change our policies in such a way that appeals to them? But what kind of language should we use to get them over? Like, how do we get around Joe Rogan? How do we get someone who appeals to them? Young men know that they're going to have more trouble starting families than their parents did. They're going to have more trouble getting homes. As you mentioned, the median home buyer is 40 years old. That age has only gone up and up over the years. So the Democrats are fundamentally incapable of offering up any solutions that are going to appeal to young men, because they all hate their dad a lot, and that's actually what they see in the young men that they talk to. I'm serious. Any young man who wants to start a family, they see their father in him and they hate him. And so even on an abstract political level, they have to do things that are fundamentally anti-man. The Republicans are like 50-50 there. We've widened the tent, so there's like a lot of dad haters in the party now too, to be totally blunt. And so I think we need to try to rescue the Republican Party from that mentality and from that, how do we make the green line go up even at the expense of human well-being and new families getting started?
I think the problem is that the economy can get bad enough where it doesn't matter anymore, where they'll vote for their financial well-being in the future rather than on gendered lines if things get bad enough the way things they are. And what is the Republican solution to that right now? 50-year mortgages?
Yeah.
Lying about grocery prices going down when everybody knows that that's not true, and pretending like everything's hunky-dory when it's definitely not. Like, there aren't solutions there from either side. They're basically surviving on the fact that the left is freaking awful at speaking to men, but that eventually won't keep if things get bad enough.
And it won't keep next year. I mean, we have midterm elections coming up. We all know that Trump voters don't come out to vote in midterm elections. We already know that. They're especially not going to come out if Republicans are putting off. The problem and the reason that we have not seen Republicans take action, and I'm not going to be fair to them, but I will for a second. The solutions are hard, right? So, like, why are home prices up so much? Because, New York City, where Mamdani just got elected, 1/3 of rented apartments in that city are price controlled. I mean, so we are talking about either people who are part of like Section 8 housing, whatever the state and local version is of Section 8, plus rent-controlled apartments. Those are 1/3 of all units. Mm-hmm. You want to lower prices, you got to get rid of that welfare. I mean, because the people that are suffering are the people who are just above, being qualified for those programs. We have got to tackle the hard problems that frankly are causing the unaffordability Republicans, I don't think have the guts, and that's what's really concerning.
Well, I think you're right. Any problem that is going to require short-term pain to solve and will take more than 4 years to sort itself out is something no politician is going to actually touch, and they'll just throw Band-Aids over it. And that's the exact case with the housing market. Look, man, this is going to be dark, and I hate saying this. I'm not trying to upset or offend anyone, you know, and I know I never do that, but there is basically no way to ensure that young men can buy houses and start families other than allowing for an actual market correction to happen, which on paper is going to look awful for the economy, and which everyone is going to say is a bad thing, but is probably an important step in promoting the growth of new American families.
The other way.
And by the way, I'm not saying we go out of our way to engineer that or do anything that would negatively affect the prices of housing. I think we just have to let the market sort itself out. And if the prices come down, you let them come down instead of saying, oh my gosh, we need to allow for there to be these 50-year mortgages so that we can extend buying power so that people can purchase more house than they're able to afford traditionally based on their income level. Well, then what's the result of that? Prices don't come down.
The other thing, other than a market correction that would solve the problem, is a reduction in cost.
Well, that's what a market correction is.
No, just buy cheaper fuel, like going to a hydrogen fuel system. Something.
Oh,
where
yeah, that's fair.
Free open system. A correction would be like a market crash, and then the dollar, it requires $1 million to buy a hamburger, and everyone with Bitcoin now becomes the norm, and all these other, it'd be like 120 million people on the street begging for food, and then the Bitcoin would be the one world currency where they track you. The tracking, so the market correction would be a very bad thing for society right now. I think reducing cost with technology and another industrial revolution, but you don't see a lot of that talk in politics because a lot of times maybe they're just not at the intellectual level, or they're just too focused on getting votes. Like you were saying.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The system doesn't
people into getting. How do we get young men to vote for me? It's rather how do I actually inspire young men? Well, show them the solution.
Well, that's exactly right. And like I mentioned, we just don't have a system that's conducive to solving problems that take more than 4 years to solve and that require short-term pain. And just a slight disagreement / correction. A market correction wouldn't necessarily mean a crash, just a reduction. But I think you're right that there's other.
What do you mean?
Well, it wouldn't have to be a total crash of the prices in the housing market. It would just be a decrease, and it could even be a gradual decrease, but it probably needs to happen. I'm not saying it will.
I'm skeptical that a correction would not lead to a crash because
I'm not. I agree with you. I'm just saying it's not impossible. I'm saying they're not the same thing. That's all.
I'm not talking about a crash of just the housing market. Right now we've got a dollar bubble. Like it's an everything bubble. The stock market is in a bubble because of the all of the money that's been printed. All the people are just buying stock with free money. Like there's an everything bubble right now. So a correction in the housing market could turn into an economy-wide crash, and it's very, very dangerous.
And just for semantic, a crash would be a type of correction. Not all corrections are crashes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.